17-year-old Jamal Carter is used to hard work, whether it's juggling school, part-time jobs, or volunteering at the local animal shelter. But when a quiet afternoon walk turns into a heroic rescue of a drowning golden retriever, Jamal's life is about to change in ways he never imagined. The dog's owner, Eleanor Winters, wealthy, cold, and influential, reacts not with gratitude but with shocking indifference, leaving Jamal hurt and confused. Days later, Eleanor reappears at his doorstep with an apology and a life-changing offer. She'll pay for Jamal's dream of becoming a veterinarian, but there's a catch. As Jamal wrestles with his decision, he uncovers buried secrets about Eleanor's past and her family's role in a scandal that reaches back to his own father. Now, Jamal must decide whether to accept her help or expose the truth, putting both their futures on the line. Chapter 1: The Rescue. Scene 1: A day like any other. The late afternoon sun bathed the park in a golden glow as Jamal Carter slung his backpack over one shoulder, walking home after another shift at the animal shelter. He liked to take the long way home through the park. The peacefulness of the trees and open grass helped him unwind, and it gave him time to think. Today, though, his mind was busy with thoughts of college applications and scholarships, his future, so uncertain, yet full of potential. "Just keep pushing, Jamal," he muttered to himself. "You'll figure it out." As he rounded a bend in the path, a loud splash interrupted his thoughts. He paused, head tilting toward the noise. There it was again, frantic splashing, followed by the unmistakable sound of barking. Jamal's heart raced. He sprinted toward the sound. Scene 2: The Drowning Dog. Jamal skidded to a halt at the edge of the park's pond. There, in the middle of the murky water, a golden retriever was struggling to stay afloat, its fur matted and weighed down by the water. Without thinking, Jamal dropped his backpack and plunged into the pond, the cold water hitting him like a shock. "Hold on, I'm coming," he called, his strokes powerful as he swam toward the flailing dog. The retriever's eyes were wide with fear, and it let out a desperate whimper just as Jamal reached it. "Shoo, it's okay, I've got you," Jamal soothed as he wrapped his arms around the dog's chest and began pulling it back to shore. The weight of the dog and the resistance of the water made the task difficult, but Jamal gritted his teeth and pushed forward. He wasn't going to let this dog drown. When they finally made it back to the bank, Jamal hoisted the dog onto the grass, cradling the trembling animal in his arms. The dog, exhausted but alive, let out a soft whine, licking Jamal's cheek as if in thanks. "Hey, you're safe now," Jamal said, his breath coming in short gasps. He smiled, feeling a swell of pride in his chest. Saving animals was what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. This was a small reminder of why. Scene 3: The Cold Encounter. As Jamal knelt beside the dog, catching his breath, he heard footsteps approaching. He looked up to see a woman hurrying toward him, a tall, middle-aged woman with sharp features, dressed in a designer suit and heels that looked entirely out of place in the park. "Bella! Oh my God, Bella!" the woman cried, rushing over. Jamal stood up, expecting her to thank him, but she barely spared him a glance as she bent down to inspect the dog. "Is she okay?" Jamal asked, wiping the water from his face. The woman, still not looking at him, pulled Bella close and muttered, "You should have been more careful." Jamal blinked, unsure he had heard her correctly. "Excuse me?" Finally, the woman stood, her gray eyes meeting his for the first time. "I said you should have been more careful. Why was my dog in the water in the first place?" Jamal's mouth fell open. I don't know. I just heard her barking and saw her struggling. I jumped in to save her." The woman gave him a once-over, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, she could have drowned." Jamal felt a surge of anger. "I know. That's why I saved her." Without a word of thanks, the woman turned and began walking away, Bella trotting at her side. Jamal stood there, drenched, his hands clenched into fists. He had risked his own safety to save her dog, and she couldn't even be bothered to say thank you. Unbelievable, Jamal muttered under his breath, watching her leave. He picked up his backpack and started walking home, the weight of the encounter pressing down on him like the damp clothes clinging to his skin. Scene 4, The Aftermath. Jamal's house was modest but cozy. As he walked through the front door, his mother glanced up from the kitchen, where she was preparing dinner. "Jamal, why are you all wet?" she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Jamal dropped his backpack on the floor and sighed. "I saved a dog from drowning in the park." His mother raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Really? That's wonderful. Whose dog was it?" Jamal groaned, flopping onto the couch. "Some rich lady's golden retriever. I pulled it out of the water, and she didn't even thank me. She acted like it was my fault the dog was in the pond." His mother frowned as she sat down next to him. "Some people don't know how to appreciate kindness, baby. You did the right thing, even if she couldn't see it." "Yeah, I guess," Jamal muttered, but the encounter left a bitter taste in his mouth. "It just felt so wrong, you know. I was trying to help." His mother patted his knee. "Don't let it get to you. You have a big heart, Jamal, and not everyone will appreciate that. You just keep being the person you are." Jamal nodded, but his mind was still buzzing with the unfairness of it all. He spent the rest of the evening trying to shake the frustration, but the woman's cold demeanor stayed with him, a nagging reminder of the divide between their worlds. Scene 5, A Mysterious Visit. It was 3 days later when there was a knock on the door. Jamal, who was sitting in the living room, working on his homework, stood up to answer it. When he opened the door, his breath caught in his throat. Standing on the doorstep was the woman from the park, Eleanor Winters, though Jamal didn't know her name yet. She looked different now, her sharp edges softened, and her expression no longer cold but uncertain. "Hi," Jamal said cautiously. "Can I help you?" Eleanor looked at him for a long moment before speaking. I came to apologize." Jamal blinked. "For what?" "For the way I acted when you saved Bella," she said, her voice quieter than before. I was rude, and you didn't deserve that." Jamal stared at her, not quite believing what he was hearing. "It's okay, I guess." Eleanor sighed and shook her head. "No, it's not. There's more I need to say, but it's complicated. Could we talk? I owe you an explanation." Jamal hesitated, his curiosity piqued despite himself. Sure, I guess. Come on in." As Eleanor stepped inside, Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Her sudden apology, her shift in demeanor, it all felt too strange. He had a feeling this was just the beginning of a much deeper story. Chapter 2, The Offer. Scene 1, Eleanor's Confession. Eleanor sat stiffly at the kitchen table, her eyes flicking around Jamal's modest home. The tension in the room was palpable as Jamal's mother, Carmen, stood by the sink, her arms crossed, observing the visitor warily. Jamal shifted uncomfortably in his chair, still unsure why Eleanor had come to apologize. "I owe you more than just an apology," Eleanor finally said, her voice low but steady. "I owe you an explanation for why I acted the way I did." Jamal raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." Eleanor took a deep breath. "When I saw you with Bella, I was reminded of someone. Someone I lost a long time ago. My reaction wasn't because of anything you did, but because of what I've been holding on to for years. I didn't know how to handle it, and I took it out on you." Jamal frowned, confused. "What do you mean? How could seeing me save your dog remind you of something like that?" "My son," Eleanor replied quietly. "He passed away when he was young. Bella was his dog. I've never been able to look at her without thinking of him, and seeing her in danger." I panicked. Jamal's eyes softened as the weight of Eleanor's words sank in. I'm sorry to hear that. Eleanor nodded, blinking back tears. I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. You saved Bella, and for that, I'm grateful. I came here to make things right. Jamal exchanged a glance with his mother, who gave a barely perceptible nod, indicating that he should hear Eleanor out. Scene 2, a tempting proposition. After a long pause, Eleanor spoke again. There's something more. I want to offer you an opportunity. An opportunity? Jamal repeated, unsure where this was going. Eleanor's hands clasped tightly in her lap. I know you have dreams of becoming a veterinarian. I did some research, and I found out how hard you've been working, volunteering at the animal shelter, doing everything you can to make your dream a reality. Jamal tensed. He wasn't sure how he felt about Eleanor digging into his life. I can help you, Eleanor continued. I can pay for your entire education, all your tuition, fees, everything. You won't have to worry about finances anymore. Jamal's heart skipped a beat. It was everything he had ever wanted, right there on the table. But there had to be a catch. Why would you do that for me? He asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. Eleanor hesitated, her eyes searching his face. Because I believe in second chances, Jamal. And I think you deserve one. But. Jamal's stomach dropped. But what? There's something I need in return, she said slowly. You'd have to work for me, doing some personal projects. Nothing unethical, but it would require your time. You'd need to stay quiet about certain aspects of my family's business. Jamal narrowed his eyes. What kind of business are we talking about? Real estate, Eleanor said. It's complicated, but let's just say there are a few deals my family has made that might not hold up under scrutiny. I need someone I can trust to manage certain details while keeping everything discreet. Jamal's mind was spinning. It sounded like she was offering to pay for his future, but at a cost he wasn't sure he could stomach. Scene 3, Seeking Advice. Later that evening, Jamal sat at the dinner table with his mother, the uneaten food on his plate growing cold. He had told her everything, Eleanor's offer, the money, the strange condition attached. She's offering you a lot, Carmen said cautiously. But it sounds risky. What exactly is she asking you to do? Jamal shook his head. I don't know all the details yet. But something about it feels off, Mom. I mean, it's a chance to get everything I've ever wanted, but it doesn't feel right. Carmen leaned forward, her face serious. Baby, you've always been a hard worker, and you've earned every bit of what you have. But be careful. Not all opportunities come with good intentions. Jamal nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I just don't know what to do. I can't tell you what decision to make, she said softly. But I can tell you this, you need to be true to yourself. If something feels wrong in your gut, trust that feeling. Jamal stared at the table, his mind whirling. How could he turn down such an incredible opportunity? But at the same time, how could he get involved in something that felt so murky? Scene 4, Jamal's Dilemma. That night, Jamal lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling. His dreams of becoming a veterinarian had always felt like a distant hope, something just out of reach. But now, the opportunity to make it real was right in front of him, and all he had to do was accept Eleanor's terms. But could he live with himself if he did? Jamal rolled over, burying his face in his pillow. His heart told him one thing, but his mind told him another. Was he being foolish to turn down such a life-changing offer? Or would accepting it mean compromising everything he believed in? He thought about his father, how he had always stood up for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. Jamal knew deep down that his father would never have taken a deal like this, no matter how much it offered. But Jamal wasn't his father. He had to make his own decisions, find his own path. The next morning, Jamal woke up determined to confront Eleanor and demand answers. He wasn't going to let himself be pulled into something without knowing the full truth. Scene 5, Decision Day. Jamal arrived at the Winters estate, his heart pounding as he approached the grand front doors. The house was even more imposing in the daylight, a stark contrast to his own modest home. He rang the bell and waited, his hands clenched tightly at his sides. Eleanor opened the door, her face unreadable. "Jamal, come in." Jamal followed her inside, his gaze sweeping over the opulent surroundings. He felt out of place here, but he pushed the discomfort aside. He was here for answers. "I've thought a lot about your offer," Jamal began, standing tall. "But before I make any decisions, I need to know the full story. What exactly are you asking me to do?" Eleanor's eyes flickered, and for a moment, Jamal saw something like fear flash across her face. She hesitated, then gestured for him to sit. "You're right to ask," she said slowly. "There are things in my family's past, deals my husband made, that weren't entirely above board. Real estate transactions that benefited us at the expense of others. I need someone I can trust to make sure those records never see the light of day." Jamal felt a chill run down his spine. "So, you're asking me to help cover up something illegal?" "No," Eleanor said quickly. "It's not illegal, just messy. If it got out, it could ruin everything." Jamal stood up abruptly, his decision made. "I'm sorry, but I can't be a part of that." Eleanor's face fell. "Jamal, wait. Please, just think about it. I'm offering you a future." "And I appreciate that," Jamal said, his voice firm. "But I can't sell out my principles for money. I want to be a veterinarian, but not like this." Eleanor said nothing as Jamal turned and walked out of the house, his heart pounding. He had made his choice. Now, he had to live with it. Chapter 3, The Revelation. Scene 1, Digging Deeper. After leaving Eleanor's estate, Jamal couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was seriously wrong. Eleanor's hesitance, the vague details about her family's business, it all felt off. He needed answers, and he wasn't going to wait for them to fall into his lap. The next morning, after his shift at the animal shelter, Jamal made his way to the public library. It was quiet and smelled faintly of old books. He sat down at one of the computers and began searching for information on Eleanor's late husband and the Winters family's real estate dealings. At first, all he found were glowing articles about their business empire. But then, buried in an old newspaper archive, he found something that made his stomach twist. An article from years ago detailed a scandal involving the Winters family in several land deals that had displaced dozens of families, particularly black and low-income communities. There were whispers of corruption and backroom deals, but nothing had ever been proven. Jamal leaned back in his chair, his heart pounding. Could this be what Eleanor was hiding? Had her family built their fortune on the backs of others? "I knew it," Jamal muttered to himself. He wasn't just walking away from a suspicious offer, he was uncovering something much deeper. Scene 2, Confronting the Past. Jamal couldn't get the article out of his mind. The next day, he went to speak with Mr. Johnson, an old family friend who had lived in Riverview for decades. Mr. Johnson was well connected in the community and always seemed to know everything about everyone. "Mr. Johnson, can I ask you something?" Jamal said as he helped the elderly man with his groceries. "Of course, Jamal," Mr. Johnson replied. "What's on your mind?" Jamal hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "Do you remember anything about the Winters family? Anything strange about their real estate deals from years back?" Mr. Johnson's eyes narrowed as he set down the last grocery bag. "I do. In fact, I remember a lot of people being upset about how they got their hands on certain properties. It wasn't right, what they did to those families." "What do you mean?" Jamal asked, leaning forward. "There were a lot of shady deals," Mr. Johnson said, his voice lowering. "People were forced off their land, and the Winters got rich. There were rumors that some people tried to fight back, but no one could touch them. They had too much money, too much power. Jamal felt a chill run down his spine. Eleanor's offer was starting to make more sense, and it wasn't sitting well with him. Scene 3, Eleanor's True Motives. That evening, Jamal sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the article he had printed out. He knew what he had to do. The next day, he would confront Eleanor and demand the full truth. He couldn't move forward without knowing exactly what he was getting into. The following afternoon, Jamal stood in front of Eleanor's estate once again, his heart racing. When Eleanor answered the door, her face fell. "Jamal, what is it?" she asked cautiously. "I found out about the land deals, Eleanor," Jamal said, holding up the article. "The ones that displaced families. The ones that made your family rich." Eleanor's face paled, and she stepped back, her hand gripping the door frame. "You don't understand." "No, I think I do," Jamal interrupted, his voice rising. "You want me to help you cover up what your family did, don't you? That's why you offered to pay for my education. You don't want anyone to find out what really happened." Eleanor closed her eyes and sighed heavily. "Jamal, it's not as simple as you think." "Then explain it to me," Jamal demanded. "Because right now, it looks like you're trying to buy my silence." Eleanor motioned for him to come inside, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "You're right. My family did things I'm not proud of. My husband, he made a lot of deals that hurt people. I didn't know about it at the time, but when I found out, I was already in too deep. I've spent years trying to make things right, but it's not enough. And now, if the truth comes out, everything will be destroyed." Jamal stared at her, his mind racing. He wanted to believe her, but the more she spoke, the more he realized how far-reaching the damage truly was. Scene 4, A Family Meeting. Jamal left Eleanor's estate with more questions than answers. When he got home, he sat down with his mother and told her everything, about the article, the scandal, and Eleanor's offer. Carmen's face grew tight with anger. "I knew there was something wrong about this whole situation. I don't trust that woman, Jamal. She's trying to use you to clean up her mess." "I know, Mom," Jamal said, his voice heavy. "But I don't know what to do. She's offering me a way out, a way to pay for school, but at what cost?" Carmen shook her head. "Your father wouldn't have taken a deal like that, and neither should you. You're better than that, Jamal. You've worked too hard to let someone buy your integrity." Jamal nodded, but a part of him still felt conflicted. He wanted to make his father proud, but he also wanted to secure his future. Could he do both? Later that night, Carmen called a family meeting, inviting Jamal's aunts and uncles to weigh in. Around the dinner table, they shared their own stories of facing difficult choices, of dealing with systemic racism and unfair opportunities. "You've got to be careful, Jamal," his Uncle Ray said, leaning back in his chair. "People like the Winters. They've been playing this game for a long time. Don't let them drag you down with them." His Aunt Lisa nodded in agreement. "You're smart, Jamal. You'll figure out the right thing to do." Scene 5, A New Discovery. The next day, as Jamal prepared to make his final decision, he stumbled across something he hadn't expected. While cleaning out an old storage box in the attic, he found a folder labeled Dad's Work. Curious, Jamal opened the folder and began sifting through the papers. Inside were documents, old newspaper clippings, and notes about land disputes involving the Winters family. Jamal's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the connection. His father had been involved in trying to stop the very land deals that Eleanor's husband had orchestrated. His father had fought to protect the families who had been displaced, and now Jamal was being asked to help cover it up. "This changes everything," Jamal whispered to himself. His father's legacy was directly tied to the scandal. Accepting Eleanor's offer would mean betraying his father's memory. Jamal stood in the attic, the weight of the past pressing down on him. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't accept Eleanor's offer, not when it meant turning his back on everything his father had stood for. As he left the attic, Jamal felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but he knew he had to honor his father's fight for justice. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. Chapter 4, The Choice. Scene 1, The Family Secret. Jamal stood in the kitchen, the weight of the folder from the attic still heavy in his hands. His mother sat across from him, her expression pained as she read through the documents. When she looked up, her eyes were misty, filled with the weight of memories long buried. "Mom, why didn't you tell me about Dad's connection to the Winters family?" Jamal asked, his voice cracking with emotion. He was fighting against them, trying to stop what they were doing, and now I'm being pulled into their mess. Carmen sighed deeply, setting the papers down. "I didn't want you to carry that burden, Jamal. Your father fought hard to protect those families, and when he died, I thought it was better to leave it all in the past. I didn't want you growing up with that same anger, that same fight." "But it's all connected," Jamal said, his frustration rising. "Eleanor's family got rich off the suffering of people like us, and now she's offering me money like it can fix everything." Carmen reached across the table and took his hand, her eyes full of empathy. "Baby, I know this is hard. I know you want to make things right for your father, for those families. But you have to think carefully about what you're going to do next. Is exposing them the right thing? Or is there another way to honor your father's legacy?" Jamal squeezed his mother's hand, feeling torn. He knew his father wouldn't have accepted Eleanor's deal, but he also knew that taking the high road might mean sacrificing his own dreams. Scene 2, The Final Confrontation. Jamal couldn't avoid it any longer. He had to confront Eleanor one last time, to finally hear the truth from her lips and make his decision. When he arrived at her estate, Eleanor looked more tired than usual, as though the weight of her secrets was finally catching up with her. "Jamal," she greeted him with a somber expression. "I wasn't sure if you'd come back." "I needed to," Jamal replied, his voice firm. "I found out everything about your family's past. The land deals, the people your husband hurt, my father was one of the people trying to stop him." Eleanor's face paled. "Your father? I didn't know." "Well, now you do," Jamal said. "And I need to hear the truth, Eleanor. I need to know why you offered me this deal. Was it just to cover up what your family did?" Eleanor sat down heavily, her eyes filled with regret. "When I made that offer, I thought it was the only way to make things right. I thought that if I could help you, maybe it would balance out all the wrongs we committed. But I see now that it wasn't enough. I was just trying to protect my family's legacy, not fix the damage we caused." Jamal's jaw tightened. "So what now? You want me to help you keep hiding the truth?" "No," Eleanor whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I want to make amends. But I can't do it alone. If this comes out, it'll ruin everything. But maybe that's what needs to happen." Jamal stared at her, unsure whether to believe her change of heart. "You're asking me to help you expose your own family?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "I am. But I won't ask you to do it alone. I'll stand by you. It's time to face the consequences, for both of us." Scene 3, A Fork in the Road. Jamal left Eleanor's estate, his mind buzzing with the weight of her words. As he walked through the park, his feet tracing the familiar path by the pond where he had saved Bella, he realized he was at a crossroads. He could accept Eleanor's help, expose her family's misdeeds, and risk his own future in the process. Or he could walk away, pursue his dreams on his own terms, and leave the past behind. He stopped at the edge of the pond, staring at the still water. The decision felt impossible, like no matter what he chose, someone would lose. But he couldn't ignore the pull of his conscience. His father had fought for justice, and now it was his turn to carry that fight forward. Jamal took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his choice settle on his shoulders. He knew what he had to do. Scene 4, A Decision of Integrity. The next day, Jamal called a press conference at the community center. It wasn't easy, but with Eleanor's help, they gathered enough evidence to expose the Winters family's corrupt land deals. As he stood at the podium, facing a room full of reporters, his heart pounded in his chest. "I'm here today to tell the truth," Jamal began, his voice steady but emotional. "For years, the Winters family has profited from the displacement of families in this community. My own father was one of the people who tried to stop them, and he lost his life in the process. It's time for the truth to come out." The room buzzed with whispers as reporters scribbled down notes and cameras flashed. Jamal felt a surge of fear, but he pushed it aside. This was the right thing to do. Eleanor stood beside him, her face pale but resolute. "I'm here to take responsibility for my family's actions," she said, her voice shaking. "We were wrong. And it's time we face the consequences." Scene 5, A New Beginning. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from the press conference was swift. The Winters family's reputation was shattered, and Eleanor faced legal battles that would take years to resolve. But through it all, Jamal felt a sense of peace, knowing that he had honored his father's legacy. One afternoon, as Jamal was cleaning kennels at the animal shelter, he received an unexpected visitor. A representative from a local scholarship foundation had heard about his bravery and integrity, and they wanted to offer him a full scholarship to veterinary school. Jamal stared at the letter in his hands, hardly able to believe it. All his hard work, his sacrifices, had led to this moment. And the best part? He had stayed true to himself. That evening, Jamal sat on the porch with his mother, the scholarship letter in his lap. "You did it, baby," Carmen said, her voice filled with pride. "No," Jamal said, smiling softly. "We did it. Dad would be proud." As the sun set over Riverview, Jamal knew that his future was bright. He had faced the truth, made the hard choices, and emerged stronger on the other side. Whatever came next, he was ready.